on education to order. To begin with, I want to make an introduction. To my left here, we have Justin Smith. He's brand new with us here in the LRC. He's going to be an analyst, a post-secondary analyst. So, Justin, welcome. Let's welcome Justin to the team. Okay, could we have the roll call, please?
Senator Kerr, Senator Parrott, Senator Wise, Representative Banta, here. Representative Bojanowski, Representative Fleming, present. Representative Flood, Representative Graham, here. Representative McCool,
Here.
Representative Miller, here. Senator McDaniel, Representative Petrie, Representative Reed, Representative Huff, Co-Chair Riley, here. Co-Chair West,
Here.
Chair Tipton.
Here. You should have had the minutes are in your packet. You should have had them sent to you electronically with the meeting materials. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 21st meeting? Have a second? Second. Have a motion second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The motion carries. We do have a lot of information to go through this morning. Our first item on the agenda today is a presentation from the Council on Post-Secondary Education. President Thompson, you and your team come forward, and please, I think you know the routine. Please introduce yourself for the record, and then I will swear you in.
Thank you, Chair Tipton and committee. Aaron Thompson, the president of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education.
I'm Lee Nemec. I'm Vice President and Chief of Staff at CPE.
Okay, you raise your right hand. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much. President Thompson, y'all please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, sir. And I'll make the presentation fairly fast, but hopefully we'll have some real conversation and questions afterwards. I just want to thank you for allowing us to come to the table to talk to you a little bit about what's going on with CPE, and especially the last 4 or 5 years. We're happy to talk about that. For a lot of reasons, I think you're going to be happy with some of the things we've done, but also with the idea that I think we can do even more that's crucial for this state. So we're here to talk a little bit about how we see what we do now. And I want to be really clear how we see it. And I'll state it in its way. You know, right now our economy is doing well. But if you look at the direct correlation, and it's more than a correlation, by the way, it's causal even to that degree. In order for the economy to stay doing well and to bring in even a more thriving, robust economy, we're going to have a highly educated workforce. 90% of the jobs in this future is going to require a credential that matters to make this happen. So the only way we're going to do that is to have a strong higher ed system. And so that's the direct correlation. And so we're here to talk about how we've changed and how we have focused truly on that one outcome. Our 60 by 30, and I'll talk about here in a second, is really, that wasn't a set of percentages that came out of the blue. It said that by 2030 we have to have 60% of our citizens in Kentucky with a credential that matters, or we will fail to provide what's needed to be provided for the state to do what it needs to do. And you also know the importance of higher ed, without a doubt. If you don't believe me, look at the percentage of folk without that education certificate that matters or any other degree that's in prisons, that's on Medicaid, and so on. So you've heard me argue so often about the importance of investing strategically in the future of Kentucky. Well, that's a part of this conversation. So I'm happy to be the president of the council during this time to talk about that. I want to first of all thank you for actually investing in higher ed over the last, historic investments. And I just want to say that before we get started. We truly, and I'm representing the campuses when I say this, even though I'm here to talk about CPE proper, you know, they actually needed it, as you all know. And the other point I'll make is that with the performance funding mechanism, you have an accountability system with us that's fairly clear. There's no doubt about it. So CPE as a whole, we do a variety of things. If you look at the statutory responsibilities we have and regulatory responsibilities, is pages, pages, pages. The thing that I think we do more of and really have concentrated heavily on is how we can get our institutions to be responsive once again to the state's needs. So I'm hired by a board, coordinating board, 15-member board that's appointed by the governor. We have a student rep on there. We've always had one, as well as we have a faculty rep. The two universities, University of Louisville, University of Kentucky, falls under our coordinating guidelines. And we're a different kind of coordinating agencies because I tell people we have enough power to get us in trouble, right? We set the tuition, we review the programs, we approve the programs, we set the strategic agenda for the state that the universities and colleges build their strategic plans around. And so we have some accountability responsibilities in that regard. Comprehensive, 6 autonomous, obviously, comprehensive campuses, KCTCS as a whole with the 16 community and technical colleges. And what a lot of people don't know, we license 100 and almost 200 non-public colleges and universities to exist in this state. And so if they don't rise to the level of doing what is needed under what I call a consumer protection issue, we don't allow them to operate. So even though we don't govern them in that sense or coordinate them in that sense, we do coordinate the fact that they need to be a legitimate, strong institution for the state of Kentucky. Want to give you some numbers first. And once again, I'm proud of this. And this took off in a way just simply because we refocused what we were focusing on. We couldn't do everything, but we decided we were going to double down on all those items that are good for Kentucky. So in the last 5 years, with our latest data through 21, and as you all know, 21 was the year of COVID. So we've got another year of actually getting data back on that, but we still have gone up 7.6 percentage points overall in our 6-year graduation rates. Now, that's huge. I mean, they're percentage points, not percent. Our URM's up 9.5 percentage points. We're closing gaps in Kentucky in this area. 6.1 percentage points on low income. This is an area I'm truly worried about, and you'll hear me talk about that a little bit later on because we've got to figure out how we address that, and we'll talk a little bit about the college going rate with this in a minute. 3-year graduation rates for our KCTCS campuses. We knew that we were going to have to focus on student success and really get more credentials out that mattered in these middle skilled jobs too. So we doubled down on that in the last many years to make sure we supply what's needed for our manufacturing folk here in Kentucky. But we're up 13.6 percentage points there in graduation, 2.2 percentage points in URM. That's an area where we're going to have to double down on there with our KCTCS campuses. And our low income, where KCTCS has many of those, as you all know, 14.5 percentage point increases. If you look at undergraduate degrees overall at our state universities, once again, 21 slowed us down a little bit, but we're still up overall 2%. Our URM, we're up 25%. KCTCS up 28%, URM 46%, low income 17%. And graduate credentials are up tremendously. Point is that we're closing gaps almost in every category, including our educational attainment category, in which I'll get to here right now. And in order, once again, we're on this trajectory of 60% by 2030. And to get there, we had to average, at the time we did this 5 years ago, we had to average about 2.5 what?
1.7.
1.7, yes. But we were actually doubling that in most cases, as you all see. But 2021, once again, year of COVID, went to a 0.5. We're still up. Next year, I don't it's going to take everything we have to actually show a positive number there, but this really has had an effect on us. But before that, we were on trajectory at least double the rate that we had planned on. And so we're at 49.2% now, close to the 60%. And that's been a huge increase in the way we prepared people for jobs here in Kentucky. So we've had a lot of expanded duties. I just want to mention a few that has happened. One is that we've taken on the performance funding system that we have to administer. That is no easy task, I promise you, but we are doing it. A lot of COVID-related items. We developed a very progressive DEI policy that focuses on a variety of things, helping our campuses to be learner prepared, helping them also to express what they need to do no matter what student comes on their campus, from what background they came from, what ideology they are, that they feel comfortable on that campus to work and to learn. We've increased our heavy focus on our post-secondary and workforce needs. Kentucky was the first state to really grab this employability skill, some of you call it soft skills, and start incorporating it into our curriculum. We've got, I'm sure you read, a lot of national attention about being on the front end. In a few minutes, I'll skip over the slide when we get here. We're now focusing on what we consider a graduate profile and incorporating as many of our programs and our general education as we can that focuses on those competencies that employers say they need. In the past, we had this idea that general education is something you get through with fast so you can get to the really important stuff. And our employers are saying, but I don't care what degree you're giving us, you may be technically prepared, but they don't have these employability skills. So we're going to start incorporating, we already started, incorporating this into this process. And the idea is that when an employer gets one of our students, they're going to know that they are employable ready. And the student themselves, him or herself, will know that they're employable ready, which means that we're going to have to change the way we look at things, such as I believe that every student in Kentucky, it's a goal of mine that by 2030, every high school or college student will have a work-based learning experience, apprenticeships, internships, or something. We know that that matters. But we also had to bring the workforce on the front end with us to design programs for the future of the workforce and not have programs that we somehow provided, then hopefully they hire students and hopefully they're ready. But we're bringing employers in on the front end. A great example is this, obviously, the Health Care Workforce Collaborative, where generously you all gave us $10 million last year. We have 48 employers with us now on this, putting their money into the game and helping us to build this pipeline faster. We've redone our academic program inventory and how we assess academic programs to make sure that they are talking with the local workforce needs regionally, that we're building programs for tomorrow and not programs in the past. If the programs are not relevant anymore, we're asking them that no longer should exist. So we've focused on that. And then, of course, last year we took over some administrative and academic review duties for KSU. I keep on going once again with all these items, and these are only just a few. There's many other items you should know. I'll just point out a couple. The return on investment, Kentucky was the first state to really look at every student that graduated from high school to find out where they were at 8 years later, what jobs they had, what degrees or not they had, and look to see how well they were doing. We wanted to see for every dollar that the state put in or any dollar that the family put in, what kind of return on investment that would be. Our data are showing, happily so, and we knew that for every dollar the state puts in, that student that stays in Kentucky, they're giving you a $67 return, best investment that I know of. We've obviously redeveloped with the help of grants. We've been very blessed to get a lot of grants from a variety of places. A focus on student success and gap closing heavily with like our Student Success Collaborative that James Graham Brown generously put in money to help provide. Now we got Gates and other folks that are helping us with. We have focused heavily on adult learners, but we're going to have to double down on this, Representative Tipton, and you and I have talked about it many times. We have 400,000 people in this state with some college and no degree or no certificate that we're going to have to go and get back into the system, or we won't get to that 60% without them. And we got even another 200,000 or 300,000 that may have not even a high school. They're adult ed folk or other people that we have to get engaged. And the Commonwealth Education Continuum, I'm really proud of. And I'm proud of all of these things, obviously. But, I mean, we knew that we could no longer blame K-12 for not providing us with what we need. The students are how prepared that they were. And so we've done we changed the whole CPE to focus on building that pipeline, as well as the workforce. And, Amanda and Jennifer and all the folks that are here to focus on that with us. So these are the areas that we have to consider. And I'll give you one other thing, then we'll move through the rest fairly quickly. When I took over this position several years ago, there's several things we did. We looked at the data and we found out we really needed to look at other items to help students to be weeded into college versus weeded out. So we became the first state holistically to become a test optional state. Second thing we did, second day on the job, probably got rid of every developmental education course in the state because students were being crammed in there and not being successful, to be honest with you. Our data showed that. And that probably wasn't a popular decision with some of our campuses at the time, I will tell you, but we did it. And guess what we're showing? You give them the wraparound services that they need, no matter where they're from, they will succeed. And that's what it's showing. So there's several things we've done along those lines. Next slide, please. We talked about the healthcare workforce. You're going to hear us talk a lot more about that. And we're going to need, though, and we're going to come to you to ask you to help us to really think about how to support more adult learners. We've got to do something very proactively here. And we've got ideas and already plans that you've obviously heard about. Or P20, we've got to double down on this. We have no choice. With 47.8% of the students in Kentucky graduating from high school are going on to a Kentucky college, we just cannot make it on that. We've got to do better in that regard. So we're going to come to you and ask you to help us to do that. And we've been looking at affordability, as you all know, and that's a big thing. And affordability comes in two phases. One is people may perceive they can't go to college, as we found out 4 years ago on my listening tour, that it was amazing how many people say, well, I can't afford to go to college, and they really just didn't know how, basically. So we're going to do a better job with information along those lines. But we do have students that can afford to go to college. We have to do a better job there. Proud to say that over the last 4 years, we've had historic low tuitions, averaging by 1.5%. But more than that, our campuses have doubled down and put their resources in addition to a very healthy state aid package, helping students to be successful once they get into college, reaching unmet needs, providing them with what they need to do that. So we become a strong data-driven state. Another item, Representative McCool, I don't know where you're at here, but we've done the student right to know, the first state in the union to point out, let every student know that here's the major, this is how much you can expect to make, this is the average loan on it you should consider before you actually borrow for it. And we've done this for every major and every college in the state. And it's out there for that to be seen. Once again, work closely with KSU. You'll hear from them today. Our DEI unit has really done a good job in building out those items that really focus on these gap closings that we talked about, along with our performance funding, along with our strategic agenda that in a few seconds I'll give Lee a chance to talk about. But the idea that we have to focus on what's, once again, the way we build out what we're doing as a state agency, true enough, but also as a campus to reimagine what the state should be looking like in 10 years and not just looking at what we've done 5 years ago. Next slide, please. Where we're headed, about 5 out of 10 Kentucky high school students go to college. We have to focus on this college readiness. We have to double down on how we use dual credit. We have to let people know that there's a free college of work-ready scholarships that people still don't know. We have to be able to use this, and I'm proud to say our dual credit are items that have showed really great return on investment. As a matter of fact, if you take dual credit courses when you're in high school, we've now been able to look at the data when they're in college, sophomore and junior year. Guess what? If you're a person of color, you actually are far more successful in college if you had a dual credit. Lee, why don't you take us through a few of these?
Sure, President Thompson. President Thompson asked me to talk a little bit about the state's new strategic agenda. I think that we included the agenda in your packets. This responsibility is actually the first listed responsibility for CPE, and that's to create this statewide agenda to help guide the work of the post-secondary system to meet the needs of the state. So this was put into the statute during the higher ed reforms in the late 90s. We've had about 4 or 5 iterations of the strategic agenda, the most recent, which came out this spring. So we really have sort of 5 key pillars, and President Thompson has mentioned each of these and talked about what we're doing. But I think it's useful to remind ourselves that, we are focused and concerned as a state about the issue of college transitions, not just high school students transitioning on to post-secondary education, but as President Thompson mentioned, we have a real challenge in the state with adult learners. The number of adult learners attending post-secondary education has decreased by about 50% over the last 6 or 7 years. And so we're really working on ways to ensure that those folks have a way back into the system, that there's a lifelong learning system so that they're skilled up and ready for meaningful work. College affordability, we've talked about, a key issue both perception-wise and reality-wise. So a lot of work going on to ensure, number one, that college costs are as low as possible, but really thinking about targeting institutional and state financial aid to make sure that students have the kinds of resources that they need. We're looking at things like textbook costs. We're looking at things like certainly early access to post-secondary education, which is a great way to lower costs. So just a range of issues around college affordability. Student success, which is really core to what we do. It's a moral imperative that if we enroll a student, that we do everything possible to make sure that they actually graduate and graduate with a degree or credential that makes sense in the workplace. Talent, President Thompson really mentioned the fact that, we can't do what we do if we're doing it in a vacuum. If we don't have programs that really respond to the needs of the state, that responds to our workforce needs, our employers, that we're not doing what we need to do. So we have certainly talked with the General Assembly about our high-need workforce areas like healthcare. Teaching is another key area of concern for us. Technology, all of these areas I think need added and intentional work and support. And so we're really focused in this area on that. Also things like ensuring that every student has a work-based learning experience, as President Thompson mentioned, and that we're doing a better job advising students about career options and putting them in career pathways earlier. And then finally, President Thompson has done a terrific job talking about the value proposition of post-secondary education. We have too many people who don't believe that college is worth the cost, that it's valuable, and when we say college, of course, we're talking about any post-secondary training beyond high school. So this issue of getting the message out, changing public perception, conventional thinking that may not be based in fact about higher education is very important, and so that is work that's ongoing, certainly at CPE and across the post-secondary community. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the strategic agenda. We've also got CPE staff who can dive into any of the strategies that would be of interest to you all.
And I'll finish this up fairly quickly now, but I just want to thank Lee. Not only did we have these 3,000 people from around the state, parents and family members, as well as K-12 economic development people, workforce people, higher ed, give us input. Lee brought in other people around the state to help us to shape this. This just wasn't inside baseball, or it wasn't shaped purely for the particular needs that would make it easy for us. Quickly, I'll just show you, since I've been at CPE, we've gotten a lot more expanded duties, as you all know, but we've gone from 11.5 million operating funds down to 6 million. Make a long story short, we've halved our budget. The cuts. But we've been blessed enough, if you look at the next slides, that means this is not including our wonderful Gear Up federally funded programs or the amount of dollars that we've been blessed enough to get to actually prop up. So a lot of the state's work has been propped up on soft dollars from other people that we've gotten. And I'm okay with that, except it's kind of hard to budget out soft dollars to keep doing this work. So we've had a 36% reduction in our workforce too. Now, I believe we have better, strong people, I'm going to argue, but numbers can become an issue. If you go to the next slide. Quickly, we're going to be coming to you, and we're going to talk about how we need to solidify some funding with really what we're trying to do around these shortages, like healthcare. I mean, and really working with our employers that we think is crucial to the future of the state. We're going to also talk a lot, Representative Tipton and West, as you all know, around strength. We have to strengthen this P-12 pathway in post-secondary. There's a lot of stuff, we're doing with our Commonwealth Education Continuum. If you haven't been involved in that, and I know you have, you really should look at it. These are very progressive items that gets us where we need to go, but we're going to have some assistance. And then we're improving the high-demand post-secondary training for adults. We are going to have to figure out what to do here. And we've got ideas. We'd love to work with you to talk about how we accomplish those ideas. But these are some of the items that we're going to be bringing with our legislative agenda to hopefully get the buy-in, input, and funding, honestly, to help us continue to do this work. Sir, we will end it there, hopefully with enough time left for questions.
Thank you, President Thompson and Lee. We do have a question from Co-Chair Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Thompson, Lee, thank you for your testimony. I know a lot of the issues that we're working around deal with the work-ready scholarships and the promotion of that. So if you could emphasize that a little bit more or talk a little bit more about that. And then also, how are we going to get more students, especially adults, in the work-ready program? I think it's an area we really have to target.
Now I'm going to let Lee jump into this. She's been leading this charge on this adult learner. Thank you, Lee. But we figured out no one knew about the work-ready scholarship, 3 or 4%. Nobody knew. Still don't. We're finding this out on our tour again. And so we were able to get some grant money, once again, to really ship out we got B Still from the Nappy Roots to actually be our spokesperson even, who came back to a Kentucky college and got his degree. And we've made some inroads there, but it's just a long way to go. And this is really where people don't like to think about funding marketing or funding ways to get the message out sometimes. But this is an area that you bring up is so true, that we've got to start feeding people into this, which may mean we need to think a little bit how we shape Work Ready.
No, I totally agree. I would say that the other sort of communications area that we need to focus on with Work Ready is our employers. It's always surprising to me in talking with some of the folks out in the employer community that they don't know about this program. And, if they're talking about incumbent workers who need to skill up and they may have the opportunity to fund that education through Work Ready and they don't know about it, seems to me to be a missed opportunity for the state.
And yeah, it's going to take employers without a doubt on the front end. Many of those will also give you assistance to go back, but they do need, so the Work Ready, the way it's designed now, I think there needs to be a conversation about how we tweak it some. I know Representative Tipton and I talked about that, about how we tweak it a little bit to really be able to target to our adult learners.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have a question from Chairman McDaniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Thompson, it's good to see you guys again. Thank you for being here. I think something we need to begin to think about very, very, very seriously, and it's one of those where your life experience begins to shape the way you view issues. As my children are beginning to progress into college now, I'm really realizing just how, even for kids who stay on that logical path of high school into college, the world is just so different for them. I've got one who's going to school full-time right now and not setting foot on a college campus in Kentucky, at a Kentucky school. I've got another one who's a junior in high school who's almost carrying a full-time college load from her high school campus. And so I think we have really got to think long and hard about the physical assets that the Commonwealth has versus the student demand for that online experience. And like you talk about with adult learner and stuff, so many of them want that virtual experience that works around, work and soccer and, church and all those, where they can plug it in 20 minutes here and there. And I don't know the answer to it, and I know that you guys are working on it, but I think to say that accelerating it is worthwhile endeavor is an understatement. But at the same time, we really do have to think about, especially with demographic trends like we're seeing, not just in the Commonwealth, but around the nation with birth rates and so on and so forth. Do we just need to look at a smaller physical footprint, but an expanded online offering?
Oh, you asked the $1 million, probably more than $1 million question, but you asked the question that's extremely important. Yes, the answer is yes. Quickly, and I know we're going around out of time because there's some meat here. One is that we're also going to have to then be able to set up a virtual infrastructure, I call it, maybe not physical infrastructure, but virtual infrastructure to help these students, because this is the way we're going. We, and Chair Tipton and I talked about it right now, we're going to have to start thinking about how we do more competency-based too, because for adult learners, they're bringing many more things to the table than we ever thought about. If you and I went back to school now to teach a class or to teach in high school, even though I would argue we probably could do it, but I may not get as much with my background, as much reward for doing that from my experience than we should. So your question is the question we have to focus on. And with our Commonwealth Education Continuum, it's what we're doing. And how we do then dual credit in a way that is aligned in such a fashion that allows some of that to take place. So as we think about our physical plant, I think we're going to have to really think more mentally about what does it look like to have a virtual plant? What does it look like for me to support? I bet all your kids who are involved are probably different kind of kids doing different kinds of experiences that are still doing something similar, though, with output. So the idea that this is exactly the way we need to start going. The other thing I would argue, though, we do need to be able to give them a physical work-based learning experience. I believe that, because I believe that's what employers want in addition to becoming more virtual. So education then as a whole, college education as a whole may look a little different, and it should look different than the way we have historically done it, the sit and get in the classroom, all those elements by which. But we also know that they're going to need more wraparound services than ever. We're going to need to help faculty to be trained how to engage students better even in the online environment. So I know this is a long answer. There's a whole lot to this, but that's exactly the sorts of conversations that we should be having in a holistic way.
Chairman McDaniel, I know some folks from Western Governors University who would like to talk to you. Last year I was out at Salt Lake City, had a chance to tour their facility out there. They are a totally online-based 4-year bachelor and master degree program. Sure. Their average time to bachelor degree is 2.4 years. It's competency-based. It's all online. They have the supports. And I think that's the type of things we have to look at, especially for these adult learners who are working, to have that type of option. So we're having those conversations. Representative Graham has a question.
I just want to get back to the businesses that you've been talking about have invested. As you know, we've got a lot of new businesses that are coming to Kentucky in the next few years. Has there been any discussions with the administration about how we can appeal to them to assist us in terms of educating the workforce that we will be needing to have, and working with CPE to come up with a strategy in which these new employees will need to know and must know to continue to work in that workforce with these new businesses that are coming, as well as helping with those who are already working but who want to come back but cannot afford to come back, how those businesses could possibly help them. I know some businesses are doing that, but a strategy in which we can appeal to especially those that have an enormous amount of employees who are working for them.
The quick answer is yes, but we're going to have to do far more of this. Let me give you 2 or 3 quick examples. For an example, we were on the forefront of some of the conversations with some of the big economic development piece, because we had to show them we could provide them with the needs that they had, right? Now, what we're finding out is those needs are ever growing, because now you have all these ancillary companies that are popping up. So we're going to have to figure out how to make that faster. The other thing these folks are telling us, they want workers that can have these employability skills. They want diverse workers. They want workers, so on, right? So what that means is that we're going to have to listen to them, what they want, and how we can provide them not just with the technical skills, because in many cases they can do a lot of that training on site. So what are they asking us to do? That's the conversation you're suggesting. And yes, we are. Really, it's going to come down to a pipeline issue. And let me give you another example. That's the great thing with this healthcare collaborative. I mean, we invested very little money by comparison. I appreciate what we invested, but these folks are probably putting in $80 million themselves. You know, along the lines, they're providing us with their instructors that KCTCS cannot hire to actually teach. They're providing us with money to supplement instructors so they can do it. They're supplying them with scholarships to have their folks put into that spot. So very progressive the way we're looking at doing this, but we're going to have to put that on steroids if we're going to actually keep up what's going on. That's both the executive, legislative, and what I argue higher education needing to come to the table to figure out how we create a comprehensive plan to do exactly that. And that's what we haven't fully gotten to yet.
Well, we need to, and I hope that we are able to do that in the course of the time that all these new businesses are coming to the Commonwealth.
I fully agree. We have to take advantage of it. But I know they're first of all, they're very open to that. We're working better with economic development than ever since I've been in Kentucky.
You, President Thompson, I do have a few comments, but I will have a question at the end.
Okay.
We're talking about higher education today. And I believe historically when we've talked about education in Kentucky, we've looked at education in silos. We've got to get away from that. President Thompson, you and I have talked, you've got the P16 pipeline project. I might argue when you talk about P20. And you've heard my illustration of the chain. And if we have a weak link in that chain, it's going to impact the outcome the rest of the way up. And I'm not going to pick on Jefferson County, but I just happened to be reading a Courier Journal article last night that had a link to Jefferson County K-Prep scores. And I was looking through those scores for the elementary schools. There were a number of elementary schools in Jefferson County that the reading and math proficiency, proficient or above, was 11%. It's impossible to have an educated workforce when we have students who are coming out of school, entering fourth grade. You know my work on the Read to Succeed bill, the literacy project. We have got to work collaboratively. And the point I'm getting to is the Commonwealth education continuum, because a lot of the members here may not be as familiar with it as I am. Speaker asked me to sit on that. I've been working with that. I think one of the weak links we've identified is we need, and it's in your priority action, is advising, counseling for students. Could you elaborate a little bit more about the makeup of CEC and how it's in the work that it's doing so the members could have an understanding? I see you bringing Dr. Ellis to the table. Dr. Ellis, please introduce yourself for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I'm Amanda Ellis. Oh, thank you. I'm Amanda Ellis, the VP of K-12 Policies and Programs at the Council.
Will you raise your right hand, please?
Yes, sir.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
I do. Thank you. Please proceed.
And let me add this before she proceeds. Your point is well taken. When I took over CPA, your point is so well taken. And instead of me pointing fingers, I said we've got to do something to assist. So we took general fund dollars that I had going in other places that were toward higher ed, and we hired the best from KDE and other places. And now my whole unit is made up of great people to focus on exactly that. And if we don't do that, if you want to build a strong higher ed system, we need to figure out how to build a strong early childhood and P12 system. I can all day long just talk about this, but I know we don't have time. I'll let Amanda jump in.
Yes, sir. So the Commonwealth Education Continuum really is a collaboration from preschool all the way into workforce. And as Representative Tipton mentioned, we are going on year 2, getting ready to start the 3rd year. And what we did was pull Kentucky data on some areas that were our weak links. And what that really led to was that transition from secondary into post-secondary. And when we talked to our stakeholders, because we did face-to-face one-on-one interviews and focus groups, and we talked to students and parents, faculty, staff from K-12 and post-secondary, we found some real needs on academic preparedness, as you had mentioned, Representative Tipton, and this real desire and need for college and career advising and really making things relevant for students, because it's not just about going to school to get a credential or degree without a true outcome of career aspirations and, honestly, worthiness, that students are worthy no matter where they come from. And so what we did with that, that was our resounding need, was around advising. As you all know, the demands on counselors alone with safety, mental health issues, the COVID pandemic, all the things, plus all that they did before really puts a strain on a few. And so what we did, as President Thompson mentioned, with some COVID relief dollars we received from KDE, was to create the Kentucky Advising Academy. And what this was not to directly provide service to students, because that would not be sustainable, nor would we be able to do that in a short amount of time, but we invested in the adults who were in the buildings. So we have a lot of adults who are counselors, advisors, family resource, youth service center directors, teachers, who spend more time with kids every day than the counselors who have to maybe serve 1,200. And what we've done is we have a group of college and career counselors from across the state to be regionally representative, to know what the needs are in those regions, and to provide professional learning and support to the adults who are working in those buildings right now. And we have done that through the design and collaboration with KIA, with Gear Up, with our local schools, with our universities and community colleges. So we have representation to bring these folks together to say, what is the absolute pivotal must-have things to equip our adults to work with families and students. We are currently into our 3rd or 4th month of providing online webinars. We know that people cannot leave their buildings because we don't have subs. And so how can we provide just-in-time information and support? So we've done webinars, podcasts, we have social media presence, and then we're also working regionally to provide 2 face-to-face, one in the fall and one in the spring, really mainly to focus on what resources we already have available in this state. So, for example, one of the things that, as you all know, October FAFSA kickoff is many adults in our buildings are very intimidated by FAFSA. It's not friendly. And so if our adults in the school buildings are intimidated, it's very hard to talk to families and students about that. So that's one of our areas. So we actually brought KIA on to help elevate their supports and resources. And then we have been the deliverers of those messages and the supports to really encourage schools and districts to look into different affordability measures for their students, how to fill out applications, what's available in the state. The Work Ready Scholarship has been talked about, actually, the dual credit scholarships. Advising is a real piece that is weak across the Commonwealth, but it is absolutely essential, and not just for students, for families too. And so we had a great conversation actually yesterday in Northern Kentucky about these same topics and needs to really elevate this. And to your point, Representative Tipton, we have a lot of work to do to get these students. They have to be literate. They have to be, they have to have their numeracy skills to be able to even be prepared to take on the rigorous work in any avenue that they take, whether that is a 2-year institution, a 4-year, military, whatever it may be, to skill up. They have to have academic skills, and they have to also have their essential skills. And part of that is the navigation of our advisors and the people who work with the students every day. So our approach is more to invest in the adults who are investing in our kids, who are staying in the schools, who are working in our communities, because those are the ones who are going to be here, whether it's a budget year or not, or whether we have an initiative. But how do we invest in the people who are there already? So I don't know if that addresses your question specifically.
I do have a couple of follow-ups since you mentioned that. You mentioned FAFSA.
Yes, sir.
Of course, October 1st was the day that students, families could start engaging that process. Now, I believe I'm correct. Is it in 2023 there will be a much simplified version
Yes, sir.
of FAFSA
That's what they tell
available?
us. Yes.
So that long, intimidating document is at least going to be a short, intimidating document.
36 question,
Yes.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, so that's good.
It is good.
Do we have a rough idea how much scholarship and grant money is left on the table in Kentucky by students who do not complete the FAFSA?
Before the pandemic, it was about 40 million. After the pandemic, or during the pandemic, however you want to state that, we're probably over 50 million now. Not only that, they've expanded the guidelines, which made it go up more. That's how much federal dollars that we're leaving on the table. And it's very proud. I've supported mandatory. I think we need to help students. I'll just throw this in quickly. Students should be, we should be weeding in students, as I've said. In other words, college should be an opt-out item now, like high school it used to be. I mean, we have to have it. And FAFSA is a way for a state like Kentucky who needs the dollars, our kids. That's one of the pieces. So we have to start thinking really along those lines, in my opinion, and not just how much bureaucratic, crazy stuff it costs us. But we're going to have to start thinking about these kids and where they need to go. That's not what you asked, so I'm sorry.
That's all right. Now, you talk about 40, 50 million federal dollars. That's primary Pell Grants. And students who are Pell eligible in Kentucky are also eligible for the CAP or KTG grant. So those are additional dollars they could be utilizing to make college more affordable and have success. I have a question from Co-Chair West, and then we're going to close it off, go to our next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What age or grade level does the counseling start now? Don't know the answer to that question. Hopefully you do.
It varies depending on the infrastructure of the local districts. It's in law that sixth graders are supposed to do their individual learning plan, which was the goal around that, as many of you all know, is to really start career planning and exposure to what students can take advantage of in high school and to be looking forward to possible careers and how to get there. It really varies on what they do. A lot of times it may be a classroom of students filling out their IOP, but the one-on-one work with strategic approach really varies by district. One of the things that we keep learning about in the continuum is early and often. It's never too early to begin talking about what you want to do and how to get there. And it's really never too early to talk to families about savings, about really what is available for their children, because of what the conversation's already been is what this world looks like right now is so different than when we were students. And so, definitely middle school is a pivotal time that often gets overlooked. But middle and high are essential. And like we said, early and often is absolutely what we're promoting, and we see that it's very predictive. Ninth grade, what we're looking at with ninth grade GPA, which really goes back to eighth grade performance, attendance, behaviors, all that is predictive of high school graduation and matriculation into a post-secondary decision. So we have to invest early and often in all of our students, not just a handful.
Thank you.
And I know we're out of time. Just quickly answer that. It really does need to start holistically, what Senator McDaniel is saying, 6th, 7th grade. But we've talked to a whole lot of seniors in high school that didn't know. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, yes.
When I went to high school, hey, I need to start thinking about college as a junior or senior. But clearly,
too late.
Bare minimum, middle school, 8th grade is when you need to be 2 to 3 years ahead of the game to even prepare yourself for those opportunities. You're taking college classes in junior, senior, so
that's right.
You answered my question. It's not uniform and it's not being carried out as it should be.
Let me just say, and the more low income you are and the more person of color you are, we see that disparity happening clear there. And those wraparound services and those thoughts and those ideas and those possibilities, I'm telling people, you don't have to choose a career then. We should be offering them the possibilities, the ranges, the understanding, and the hope and the resilience and the things they need to do to reach any of these experiences that they may need to have. So I'm even asking us to think differently about even how we traditionally think about this, because I think we're going to have to be far more holistic in the way we do this.
President Thompson, thank you and your team for being here today.
Thank you all
I'm
for the
sure we'll talk
invitation.
again.
Appreciate it. Look
All right.
forward to it. Thank you all very
Next item on
much.
our agenda is presentation from Kentucky State University. President Johnson, if you and your team will come to the table and introduce yourself for the record, and then I will swear you in. Make sure the green light's on, the mic's pulled close to you.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm joined with my colleagues. First off, I'm Ronald Johnson, and I'm the interim president at Kentucky State University. I'm joined by my colleagues. To my left is Dr. Bridget Goldman, who joined us on August 22nd. I'll have her do a brief introduction of herself after I introduce the other members. And after, of course, we are sworn in. To my right, you've met Dr. Burnett, who is the interim chief of staff. And then to my far right, you've also met in the past Dr. Gerald Shields, who is the interim CFO.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you so much, and you may proceed with your presentation, Dr. Johnson.
Okay. Before we proceed, I'd like to ask Dr. Goldman if she would just do a brief introduction of herself.
Sure, absolutely.
Oh.
Good morning. Yeah, it's green now. Yeah, great. Good morning. I'm Bridget Elliott Goldman. My experience in higher education ranges back from really graduate school. I have a degree, a master's in student personnel services and counseling, as a matter of fact. Representative talked about the counseling and the counseling services. And I have 25 plus years of experience at different colleges, ranging from 2-year junior colleges to senior research institutions to community college, and also historically black colleges, HBCUs. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be at Kentucky State and working with the team. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman. I'd like to just take a moment before we get started to, one, thank you for the opportunity to provide updates. I'm reminded of a story. People are at an event, and a modern day story. People are at an event, and all of a sudden someone starts coughing and coughing and coughing, and everyone looks around and says, "COVID," and everyone runs out of the room. The person coughs and then drops dead. The coroner then reports that the person didn't die of COVID. They had a piece of food stuck in their throat, and they choked to death. So, actually, I really want to describe that with more technical medical language about how that person died. And I'm going to draw from the sagely words of Strother Martin in one of my favorite movies, where I'm just drawing from him, where I say that the person died from failure to communicate. So the purpose of coming here is to communicate so that we won't choke to death. So today's presentation has 3 components to it, and of course questions, not listed on there, but questions. And so I'll begin with an update of the 3-phase plan for KSU that I talked about in the past. And the 3 phases have stabilization as a goal, performance as the third goal, and sustainability as the third goal. Each one of these goals, of course, are guided by the requirements on HB 250. So stabilization actually overlaps phase 1 and phase 2. Subsection 1 of HB 250 overlaps phase 1 and phase 2. Subsection 2 of HB 250 is largely in phase 2. And then there's phase 3, 5, and 7. They all fall into the subsections 3, 5, and 7 of HB 250 fall under phase 3, sustainability. We are squarely in the first phase. And the first phase largely involves de-risking. The university has a bunch of risk. And there are risks that are existential, also known as killer risks. And so we've had to focus on the killer risks. If you don't focus on the killers, then guess what? You don't have to worry about anything else. And so we focus on the killer risks in the 100+ days that I've been on board. And focusing on the killer risks, the first thing you have to do is discover where they are and what are the ways in which to mitigate them, and then come up with an action plan to actually deal with them. So the first set of killer risks, I'm going to ask my colleague, Dr. Burnett, to talk about.
Good morning, Representative Tifton and fellow colleagues on the bench. It's indeed a pleasure to give you an update on the condition of the facilities at Kentucky State. Within the first 10 minutes that a parent and their students are shopping around on campus, they have made a decision just the way the campus looks. They've made a decision on how the campus, whether or not they want their kid to go to that institution or not. It's a new day, and many of these families, whether or not they're coming from impoverished communities or communities that are flourish, but at the end of the day, they're able to make decisions as to which school they would like to attend. So I'd just like to show you some of the existing photographs of Kentucky State that led to the declaration of emergency that we will talk to you a little bit more about. As you can see here in the very first set of photographs, you could see the safety violations. This is a higher ed post-secondary institution where you got doors that are bolted, which is our safety violation. Vehicles with lights broken or partially inoperable. Fluids, chemicals being mixed and not being marked properly, which breaks the OSHA laws, as you can see there in front of you. Next slide, please. As you can see at the top of the building on the left, when you don't clean your gutters, blow the leaves and limbs and the debris out on an annual basis, obviously the water begins to seep over or cause intrusion inside of the building, which I'll share with you later. But that's what you see there. You got receptacles that are not being emptied on a regular basis. You have some of the infrastructure, very, very beautiful campus, but a lot of the buildings are not being well kept from a deferred maintenance perspective. And as you can see there at the bottom, 2 slides where you have a gutter and the pipe, even though the pipe is not connected, water is not running through because the gutters on top of the roof are full of leaves and other debris. And then you could see the outdated thermostat when it comes to energy conservation. Next slide. Go to the next one. A lot of rain in our area, but when it rains, it causes erosion. And when you don't have shrubberies in a strategic location, you could begin to see the deterioration of the grounds. Again, keep in mind, first 10 minutes that these parents and students are walking around campus, and this is what they're seeing. When you don't seal the concrete walkways, over time, the rain begins to erode, and then you see other safety violations that you could see. And then you see planters, again, beautiful campus, but when it's not maintained or it's not taking advantage when it comes to putting shrubberies and flowers to make it attractive, to make it competitive with other schools, then these folks pack their bags and move on to the next location. Next slide. Inside, when they do get inside, these are some of the conditions that currently exist at Kentucky State. As you can see, the compromising of the floors, the staining of the carpets. Okay, this is what Dr. Johnson and I have discovered over the last 100 days. Next slide. Common areas where you are sitting and waiting to be serviced. This is what they see when it low staff when it comes to custodial support, housekeeping, those kind of things. Even in the restrooms where you have soap sitting in dispensers over a period of time and not being cleaned. And then you could see on that very last slide to the left where there's rain intrusion in our fitness center, as Exum. That's what the athletes are currently, and students that are working out, that's what they're experiencing right now. Same facility, bugs not being swept or cleaned up, dispensers not being emptied, mechanical units that are inoperable, rain intrusion through the roof and not being maintained, buckets catching rain and sitting for weeks at a time before someone comes and empty it out, waiting for the next storm to come. But those are the conditions that we are currently experiencing at Kentucky State. Dining hall, carpet being not clean on a regular basis to a point where even if you try to clean it, it's been stained for so long, it's very difficult to get the discoloration out of the carpet in our dining facility. Next slide. Another view of the fitness center. This is where our athletes are working out. Basketball, football teams. They're doing well. We're winning ball games, but these are the conditions they're being faced with when it comes to getting themselves in shape and preparation to compete against other schools. And then you can see also the buckets over to the right, waiting to catch the rain as it comes through the ceiling. Next slide. Self-explanatory. Don't need to go any further. Next slide. Mechanical rooms. A lot of folks don't see those, but when we had our assessment, we were able to go in the back rooms and we made other discoveries. The important thing here, it's costly. When these old obsolete mechanical units go down and becomes an emergency, it drains our resources. And you can see the CFO nodding his head because these are work orders. They have to be processed immediately in order to remedy problems that are occurring in our back rooms or in our mechanical rooms. When you get a chance, come and visit Dr. Johnson in his office. This is how the president's office looks. That problem over to the left is not a chute for Santa Claus to come through, but at the end of the day, the second or third day that I was here in August, we had a rainstorm. It looks like that today. Absolutely no actions taken to repair completely the roof with the rain or the air conditioning unit intrusion of water. And then you could see along the edge also there in the president's area where rain is coming through the roof because there's not a assessment of roof repair work to be done, as well as another mechanical air conditioner or HVAC units that are not working, and the envelope, the seal that goes around the window. In the summertime, it wasn't so bad, but now it's getting cool. That air is coming straight into the office. So, next slide. We'll go back to the previous slide. Before I turn the program over to Dr. Goldman, one of the things I learned when I was a young captain at the Pentagon, the general said, never come with a problem unless you have a solution. And one of the things that Dr. Johnson and I and the other campus constituency are looking at a professional facility management company. We're in the early negotiating stages with someone that can come in and help us remedy these problems. We're not too sure how much that's going to cost, and we may end up having to come to you all for some assistance in covering the cost of these things. But if Kentucky State is to fulfill some of the requirements and goals that President Aaron Thompson just spoke of, we want to be a part of that. But we have to make sure that we're able to attract our students, keep them here, and graduate them. And the same thing with all of the other constituencies, faculty and staff. They're also being exposed to all of these atrocious situations that I've just shared with you. So we just wanted to share these issues with you, because then that ties right back to what you read in the paper when it comes to the Declaration of Emergency of Kentucky State. Thank you, sir.
As I mentioned, we're focused on killer risk. That's the first thing. And one area of killer risk that this committee is well aware of is the lack of capability in our finance and accounting area. I'm going to be honest with you. After listening to this for a few weeks, I said, enough of this. We're going to actually bring in a team to get the finance and accounting area straight. Train the people that we currently have and augment them until we get, so I can actually have information that I need for decision making. And so that's a second area. A third area that is an existential risk is, of course, beside people running away when they come and see the facilities, we don't really have a realistic enrollment services, student experience, and career focus. And as a result, I asked our board to approve a restructuring of those areas, combining them together so that we cover from recruitment to retirement for the students. And Dr. Goldman will talk a bit about the restructuring.
Representative Tipton, you mentioned counseling and advising.
Is your mic on there,
Oh,
Dr. Gold?
There you go. Representative Tipton, you mentioned counseling and advising and the importance of counseling and advising. We've talked a little bit earlier about the importance of getting students really early. You know, our students, the students at KSU, are students that are first generation, low income, and they already have risk, many of them coming in, okay? 90+% of our students receive financial aid or on financial aid, receive financial aid, okay? It's important to have an organizational structure that from the very first, when they're prospective students, that can support them with wraparound services from the very beginning when they're even thinking about college, KSU, to not just graduation, but being an alum and really retirement. And so it was important. I've been on campus, 7 weeks at this point. But one of the very first things was to make sure that we had an organizational structure that holistically supports the student from the very beginning, as Dr. Johnson said, from, the whole recruitment piece all the way through the retirement piece. And so we restructured the area. We just, this is something that was passed last week. And we're starting with an AVP of Student Success Enrollment Services to help with the recruitment function and getting all those functions aligned properly so we can do what's necessary to get those students that have the different experiences, the high need, the high touch students, okay? It is about de-risking, okay? We know that our students have challenges to begin with, okay? We want to provide an environment where there's economic mobility, okay? But we have to start at the very beginning when they first start thinking about college, okay? To get them through the whole process. So that's important for us. To career services, all right, to academic advising, the whole piece. And so the model is such that we have the support on the front end, the recruitment piece. We have the support while they're currently enrolled with the counseling and advising, as you talked about, Representative Tipton, and also for the career services model. And then also the campus life function. Prior to the restructure, the area focused on campus life. That was the focus. Campus life, the dean of students, campus activities, Greek life, etc. But it's the holistic piece that matters for our students, okay? In terms of the economic mobility, getting them prepped not just for college, but also for the workplace, okay? And being contributing citizens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the restructuring, in addition to restructuring, tools that we need to help in terms of the wraparound services, the recruitment, partnerships that we need, empowerment. We are implementing, this is something that started before I arrived. It won't be implemented until the fall of next year, but degree works. Now that's kind of strange because I was a dean in the mountains of North Carolina in 2006, 2007. We introduced degree works up there. And so here it is 2022, and Kentucky State is now introducing that. And so, but also personalization, because as you'll see when I talk about the enrollment and retention, personalization is really important. It's not one size fits all. If it were, then I would like to be a size 32 waist. Okay. On this slide just simply reports as of the 14th of September what our enrollment numbers are. These numbers have been reported to CPE, obviously since that day, because these numbers do move around, and we do not have we don't have our final numbers until I guess it's November 1st for the U.S. Department of Education. But as you can see from these numbers, as of the 14th of September 2022, there were full-time undergraduates of 1,293 students and part-time 58. If you look at the far right-hand column where it says difference, you notice that the number of full-time students increased and the number of part-time students decreased. That actually is to the good, because full-time students, of course, provide more revenue to the institution. And down below, when we look at the graduate students and look at the far right-hand column, you see that there are more full-time students and fewer part-time students, and that probably pretty much nets out. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned to you, communications is really important, and this slide looks very complicated, but I'm going to try to help you really understand what's going on here. Basically, the idea is to actually show enrollment, because enrollment today is actually based on what happened yesterday, right? You know, that you brought in people in the past, and if they're still in the pipeline, then they actually add to what's going on today. Enrollment is not simply who you bring in today. So I'd like to draw your attention to the first column, the first green column, 2017. And then if you look down, you'll see, and you see hashtag for number. In 2017, there were 265 first-time, first-year students who came to Kentucky State University. If you go down to further down in that column, you see the blue row, and you see that there were 611 students that were already in the pipeline. They're coming into 2017. And then there were, if you go down below that blue row, you'll see that there were 145 students who well, let me step back. In the 145 students that were not actually, that came back from the past. So that's a ghost returning from the past, the ghost of Christmas past. And then the next line are the number of people who transferred in, to a total of, giving you a total of 1,158 students. This does not include dual credit students. So now, if everyone understands what that's going on in each year, you see those numbers. What's important is that look at the red row. The red row are non-returning students from the previous fall. That's what drives the enrollment at Kentucky State University. There are a number of factors that are involved in driving those numbers. And you see those numbers are huge. We go to the next slide. There are a host of factors. I've looked at, and not just as a dean or a president, I mean, I've looked at these issues for a long time. And basically, there are four categories. Some people may have some subcategories. But if you look at the columns to the right-hand side, transfer outs, stop outs, off-track, dropouts, all of those are at Kentucky State University. Where you see the yellowish gold color, that means that those particular areas on the right-hand side actually apply to each one of these categories. Affordability, value, homesickness, not the right environment. You saw those pictures, and all of these go into the mix. In order to actually build out the enrollment, we actually have to understand that level of detail, because that's what drives that big red row, and you can't do that overnight. But it also, you can't do it if you don't have it organized and you don't have the data. Next slide. Now I want to talk about something that I've talked about to this committee, and I've also spoken to other committees of the legislature, and so I want to really be very, very clear. On the right-hand side, if you look at the table on the right-hand side, those numbers there are retention numbers, as defined by the U.S. Department of Education. Retention in terms of the U.S. Department of Education are people who have come to the school, and I'm really now the people who've come to the school and as a first-year student, and then came back the next semester. I'll show you. Well, I won't show you, but I'll point out now. But then also I'll point out why that number matters for some institutions, but actually obfuscates what goes on. Remember, I used Strother Martin for those people who are familiar with the movie. Okay, that failure to communicate becomes a problem. What's most important for an institution like Kentucky State University that has the mix of first time in college, underrepresented minorities, and people with low income. Well, all three of those together, that's the population at Kentucky State University. You need to understand that the table to the left is provides more information, especially for planning and budgeting, than the table to the right. The table to the left is the progression number. So if you take the cohort that came in 2017 as a freshman, and in 2018, you see that in the top line there, 31.85% or 32% of those students were actually sophomores. If you go to the retention, 56% of the people came back, but a little more than half were sophomores. Now, what that means is that those people that came back that were not sophomores had to repeat classes, which means that their cost of attendance really is going up. Their debt is really going up. And as a result, if they don't make it through the second time they come around, then they drop out and they leave with debt. And they leave the university on the hook. We have to be able to communicate and understand what is going on. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when you look at the right-hand slide, which is based on retention, and remember, those numbers, I didn't change them. I just simply chose 2017 and 2018 because those students would have at least come to a 4-year graduation point, right? You notice that for 2017, 56% of the people came back, but the 5-year completion rate was 21%. If you look to the left and you look at progression, 32% came back as sophomores, and in 5 years, 21% graduate. Why that's important is because the progression rate is what correlates for an institution like Kentucky State University. So I did not put this in because I don't have a long history. When you look at University of Kentucky, University of Kentucky's retention rate is 86%. Graduation rate, 68%. Can you see how that model works? Eastern Kentucky, 74%, graduation rate, 48%. Western Kentucky, 73%, 54% for graduation rate. University of Louisville, 77%, 62%. Because they don't have the same concentration of students. These students are diamonds in the rough. They are first generation underrepresented minorities who don't have any income. I'm one of those people. Now, I wasn't a diamond in the rough. I was like a rock. Okay. But nonetheless, I was able to make something of myself. Diamonds in the rough. When I worked for the International Monetary Fund, I had to work on Botswana. And one of my responsibilities was to figure out the value of a diamond. So I actually went to the diamond mines. And from the diamond mines, I went to Botswana, where they actually take those rough diamonds and they clean them up and they sort them into industrial and different types of jewelry grade. Interestingly, in there, all the people wear jumpsuits, no pockets, no seams, anything, because diamonds are valuable. Then I went to Antwerp, where they cut the diamonds. And then I went to London to the Central Selling Organization, where under De Beers, in those years, they only had 300 members in the world that actually sold the diamonds. Diamonds in the rough are very, very valuable. They're valuable because they reduce the risk, they reduce the cost of crime, they reduce all these things, plus they add value directly to the coffers of the society. And as a result, it's important that we then understand that we have to actually have wraparound services and do these types of things, the things that are necessary to personalize the experience so that we can actually get the value out of the diamonds. Next up is a discussion of our new residence hall. And again, I'll turn to Dr. Burnett.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. This is a good news story. The residential hall is moving along very, very well. Construction began May 2021, and it is scheduled to open up late January. And I say late January is because our student began to return back to campus around the 8th or 9th of January. So we're currently working a transitional plan to temporarily house those individuals, hopefully on campus, but we don't know that yet based on how many kids are going to be returning for the spring semester. But the facility is opening up on the latter part of January. All of the components are being integrated into the building. As you could see, the network, security cameras, washer and dryers have been ordered and they're due to arrive in December. Furniture, which is key, but after the Christmas or holiday break, early January, began installing in the furniture. So all of those areas, as it relates to the university, new residential hall is moving along very, very, very well. We're expecting to have the punch list in the mid-January timeframe where we actually take a look at any of those deficiencies, and we'll be working with the contractors and getting those remedied. And the only things that may be not a hindrance, but something that we're going to have to work out is right now the ribbon cutting ceremony, which we wish you all would be in attendance, and we'll keep you apprised of those dates. The building naming, that's one of the things that the contractor is asking us about. But the long pole in the tent, there's an area there within the building set aside for a dining facility or dining room entity. We have to start the negotiations early with the food service vendor because it's going to take 8 months to integrate that into the building. That was something that was left out of the original scope. So Dr. Johnson and I will be collaborating with CPE as well as the chamber on getting that particular initiative off the ground so they'll be up and ready to serve our students in campus constituency next fall. But that's a long pole in the tent. And the other is a parking lot, big building with 408 students. And of course, many of them will have vehicles. So we're going to have to work that out with either a transportation consultant that can come in and advise us on how best to address that particular concern. But at the end of the day, this is a good news story. We're extremely excited. The students are excited. So we'll keep you apprised on how the new residential hall is coming along. This is another area that President Thompson talked to you about, as well as Dr. Johnson. At the end of the day, there's only 71 students who are coming from families who can afford to send their kids to Kentucky State. Only 71 students. All the other kids have to rely on some aid, either from the state of Kentucky or from the federal government when it comes to Pell, subsidized and unsubsidized loan, Parent Plus. But at the end of the day, we have a large number of our kids who have outstanding balances, as you can see in the various different categories. We'll continue to work with these students. Another good news story is that the majority, when I say majority, over 90% of these kids got grade point averages above 2.0. So they're ready for college. So we don't want to kick them out, but we're going to try to work with them to find ways for them to be able to afford to stay at Kentucky State. And if they stay at Kentucky State, they graduate. And if they graduate, guess where they're going to look for employment? In this Commonwealth of Kentucky. So we'll continue to keep you apprised on how we're progressing along with keeping these students and helping them remedy the balances that they have. Next slide. Here are some of the steps when we do get them in our payment plan. We'll continue to communicate with them through these various different sources of our platforms. And we'll also begin sending personal letters, not only to them as an individual, but to their homes. And we're going to follow the FERPA laws and all the other restrictions when it comes to communicating with students. But when those letters go to the homes, sometimes mom and dad may open the envelope and see how much they owe the institution. Instead of getting a watch or some other tangible gift, maybe they'll get a monetary gift for Christmas to help remedy their debt. But those are the communication venues that we're going to begin implementing so that we can make sure that these balances are paid off before the kids graduate from college. Next slide.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, we are, of course, at the end of our presentation, but ready for the questions from the committee.
Okay, I have a question from Chairman McDaniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And by way of a couple of welcomes here first to Dr. Johnson, your reputation as an economist definitely precedes you, and it's good to be in the same room and having these conversations with you. And certainly I did not realize your work at the diamond mines, but I just recently finished a book called The Looting Machine, dealing with, discussing lots of the areas that surround resource extraction in Africa. And I knew about some of your other work, but didn't realize you had done that. So welcome aboard, and thank you for taking what will prove to be hopefully a thankful task in the long term, but for a while it's probably going to be exceptionally thankless. And then to Dr. Burnett, the infantry guys always hated the long pole in the tent because we never got tents. So welcome aboard as well. And I wish you both this success in this endeavor. That being said, I want to give you a 10-year history, just briefly, of what I will describe as some pretty immense frustration in working with the Kentucky State crew. And you will now be my fourth administration where I've said, I can't blame you personally for the way things are, but they are where they are. And, as we heard in the last presentation, you guys have a moral imperative that the students who enroll graduate with a degree that's worth something. And I cannot say that for my limited time in the Kentucky General Assembly, Kentucky State has met that mission. They did. Kentucky State was a good institution. It was a proud institution. It was a competitive institution. And it's not. I mean, every data point that you put up there and many that you didn't reflect that it is not. And I want to see it turned around. I really, really, really do. But I think that the slides you present really told the story of where the institution is. And I kind of took notes. We had one about organizational structure, two about residence halls and unpaid bills and planning, 4 about enrollment, and 12 complaining about the state of the fiscal plant that is Kentucky State. And a lot of those little things, gutter cleaning, trash pickup, that's just culture. That's a bad culture that allows those things. Now, we made some good investments this time around, I think, but I want to walk you through some financial frustrations that I know a lot of us share, okay? Let me give you a bit of a timeline from our seat. In the spring of 2021, Kentucky State came as a result of the last turnaround plan that was supposed to be functional. And I can remember this big glossy like it was yesterday with these green check marks where we're meeting every single objective in March of 2021. And then in August of 2021, I show up, I pick up the paper, and there's an article about a $23 million hole in the budget. And then we show up for session and are asked to fund that this January, and then at the end of session get another $15 million request. And this is after years of, when all post-secondary was taking cuts, and Dr. Thompson will remember these painful times that we dealt with as we dealt with the pension plan in the state, right? K-State was the only place that not only didn't take cuts, got an increased appropriation. And this has been the pattern for the decade of limited service that I have had here. And so we have a lot of frustration with where the university has been. And I will tell you, Dr. Johnson, to something that you alluded to there but didn't say, when the search firm for the next president called and they interviewed me and they were kind enough to allow me to provide comment, I said, I hope they bring in someone who will fire everyone. And I still mean that today. And you fire anybody you need to fire to make that place do what it needs to do to meet the moral imperative to those kids, and you'll have the backing of this General Assembly. Nothing can be sacred over there, because ultimately we're bringing these young people in. Your retention rates there are awful, and these poor kids are leaving with debt that follows them around, and it's just not fair for those of us as adults who have had responsible careers, who provide oversight. And in your case, I'm confident will provide great leadership. We got to do better by those kids, because we're not setting their trajectory should be this, and instead we're at best starting them like this. And so I say all of this to say you have a big task. We want to see you succeed, but I would also say the General Assembly is probably at the end of its financial patience with Kentucky State University. And so we really need you to come with a good, solid financial plan. And of all people, your background says that you ought to be able to do it. And we're confident in that. But certainly I would anticipate having you guys back here in a couple of months. Let's get these first couple of months of the year under your belt. But when we see you back December, January for the full Appropriations and Revenue Committee, I'm going to expect some good, solid, even if they're not numbers I like to see, but solid financials. This is where we're at, right? I mean, and I want them in here a couple of weeks in advance so that our committee can pour through them. And we know what to do when we head into next session, because, a healthy Kentucky State is good for Frankfurt. It's good for the Commonwealth. But where it's been has been too much of a detriment to the university system as a whole. And I want to, we've got to make some decisions about how we move forward. And like I say, I do thank you both. You're getting an earful on a decade's worth of situations that aren't of your making. But I hope that over the next, 2 to 3 years, you'll begin to right that ship. Thank you.
To follow up on Chairman McDaniel's comments, and you alluded to it, President Johnson, I've been asking about fiscal year 21 audited financials for a year. When can we expect to have our fiscal year 21 audited financials and our fiscal year 22 audited financials? Do you have a date in mind that those will be available?
Well, I can first share with you where we are, and then I'll rely on my colleagues to the right to give you a sense of timing. Where we are, the first thing was that all of the information had to be collected, I believe, and of course we closed the books on 2021 as of September 1st. Oh, I see, August 31st. We then had to do an RFP. We worked with CPE so that we can get that RFP done. Now we are in the procurement process, and a committee has been formed that's led by Dr. Burnett and has 2 of our regions on it, both of whom are auditors, to select and also to negotiate the arrangement. Once that is completed, which I expect it will be done within a week or so, we have to have a called meeting of the board. I mean, unfortunately, these are the processes. to actually approve the auditor. And that will probably take place somewhere in the second week or so of November. And then the audit will formally begin. Typically, audits take 3-4 months, but the new auditor may want to actually do more than just tests. And so I can let my colleagues share their experiences. I can share my experience with audits that are not tests. A firm I was president of, the SEC randomly comes in and audits, and those folks were bivouacked there for weeks. There was nothing wrong, but bivouacked for weeks.
But no, sir, you've covered it all. We've already identified an accounting firm, and we hope to get them on board in the early November timeframe, 4 to 6 months, usually when a new firm comes on board, because they got to get acclimated to the campus environment and the financials. They also take a look at the internal controls and the policies and procedures, along with all of the other federal grants that we're responsible for. So that's why we're anticipating 4 to 6 months once we bring the audit firm on board. But processes are in work.
And then if I'd like to follow up, that's one of the reasons why as well, to Senator McDaniel's question, why we're bringing in a complete team so we can actually see the numbers. I'm not sure if in 2021 anyone presented the information that I presented today. What I want to be able to do is to be able to show exactly what's going on. And also because if I know exactly what's going on, then I can actually come and say, either we can fix it or we can't. If we can't fix it and it's existential, then you know the rest of the story. If we can fix it and it's existential, then it's no longer a problem and we move forward. So I just want to be clear that, yes, the finance and accounting area has been a shambles, and as a consequence, we have to recreate all of this information and to actually build a whole new team and do things the right way. Part of the reason why you had all those issues is because restricted and unrestricted monies were commingled, and so you spend it, and then you still have the obligation on the restriction. So we are getting this place shipshape first. Then we then have to look at the next phase, which are all of those risks that are not killer risks, but potentially big problems and resource eaters as we go down the road. So as we come to before this committee in the future, we will be able to talk a bit more about those because we're going to have these killer risks out of the way.
I have 2 questions, and I think we're going to have to adjourn for lunch. Co-Chair West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to make it quick. One thing I can truly say that I really appreciate is the Cool Hand Luke reference. I really love that movie. That's a great reference. But how many employees does KSU have currently?
Dr. Shields.
We approximately have about 400 employees.
Okay, and how of that number, how many are responsible for mechanical, custodial, that type of thing, I guess?
We probably have approximately about, I'll say 20, maybe 25.
20.
But some of those services are outsourced, and I don't think that those individuals are inclusive in those numbers, like custodial as well as grounds. Both of those are outsourced.
Gotcha.
To a degree.
And we allocated a deferred maintenance. The deferred maintenance pool, and KSU got an allocation this year. Some of the pictures we saw, can money from that deferred maintenance allocation be used to take care of some of those issues?
Go ahead.
Yeah, some of it can be utilized for it if you're talking about that assessment dollar amount of $8 million that you set aside. But there have been some restrictions that we have to follow. They did elaborate and make it a little broader, whereas we're able to deal with some of the dormitories and utilizing some of those funds.
And just for future reference, if you need us to come back with some language this session as it pertains to, if there's some barriers there where we can open up some of those funds to go to the boiler or go to the HVAC, whatever you need. We tried this session to do that, but if there's some language you can come to us with that helps you out, please let us know. My last comments are going to go a little bit hand in hand with Chair McDaniel's comments. I've been here since 2015, so around 7 years, and I really feel that KSU, in my time, we've never really gotten out of phase one. You have phase one, phase two, and phase three, and we've never really gotten out of that stabilization phase. And there have been underlying, I'm stating an obvious, but there have been underlying institutional failures and that have never truly been remedied. And time is of the essence, I guess, and that's kind of what. If you did, I'm sure you got that feeling from Chair McDaniel. The reason you're the new guy are experiencing a little bit of pushback is we've heard this before. We really have. We've heard this numerous times, and we've heard it before. But personally, I want to see KSU succeed. I really do, and I'm prepared to do what we need to do to help KSU succeed. But time is of the essence, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Last question comes from Representative Graham.
Thank you. I've been here since 2003, so this is my 20th year here. Mr. Shields, would you kind of just for the committee tell your experience and what you have done in the past with other universities similar to Kentucky State so they know your background, know who you are, and what you have done previously at other campuses? Because I think you're being a little bit shy about the work that you have done in the past.
Yes, sir. Well, when you have President Johnson and Dr. Burnett and Dr. Goldman, I can be a little shy because they're very prominent people within themselves and have done a lot of great work with a lot of the institutions they have. But I've worked with several institutions, HBCUs, who have had challenging and even failing financial conditions. And a lot of the things that President Johnson has stressed is where we have to put a solid foundation of our financial structure here. And I've worked with schools such as Central State up in Ohio, as well as Wiley College, Texas College, Knoxville College, Talladega College. So these institutions have had some of the, Kentucky State University has had some of these same similar issues. The point blank is that when we repair or when we fix some of these situations here, we need to plant the seed strong enough where we have changed the culture in being solid in how we're going to progress and make sure that our procedures and our policies are followed to the point where the school has a strong marching order for the future. And I believe that the team that we have right now and the plans that President Johnson is putting forth, we will get there.
Can you, Mr. Burnett, Dr. Burnett, also give testimony as to what you have done and other universities you work with in this same capacity?
Yes, Representative Graham. After retiring 22 years in the United States Air Force, I got into higher education. So I've been in higher ed for about 15, 16 years. Every school that I've worked at have had financial difficulties and have come out of that particular status, either with the state, such as Central State, where that institution was placed on fiscal watch in 2012. 2015, it was the #1 HBCU in the nation. Same thing with Jackson State, the 4th largest HBCU in the nation, 8,000 students, over a $200 million budget, but it was under sanctions with the state of Mississippi in 2019. because we didn't have enough cash, days of cash on hand. And in 2020, the state relieved the institution because it started making good progress by becoming more efficient with the management of its resources and became more effective when it came to integrating energy conservation measures and those things. Did the same thing at a couple of private schools, such as Stillman College, which is located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and most recently in 2021 at Russ College in Holly Springs, Mississippi.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a statement, but I also want to correct history, and I see most of my colleagues who have made comments have left the room. But Kentucky State is not in the position that it is. And as a graduate, and I'm a damn proud graduate of Kentucky State University, but I know in my 20 years, when this university has come before us for budgeting issues, we have not received what the other schools have received. That is the fact of the matter. And I say this about our chairman. He is an honorable man, and he is really trying to work with the university. And I say to you publicly, thank you for all the work that you are doing in terms of working with the university. But the fact of the matter is that it has never been treated in the same way that the other comprehensive schools have been able to do. They have thrived in the last 20 years. Obviously, the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky, they're going to thrive regardless because of the populations and the alumni that they have. But we cannot put this only on Kentucky State University. It is also on the General Assembly, because the General Assembly has not provided the funding that the administrations have requested year after year after year after year. But I do believe that that Kentucky State will overcome it. But this Commonwealth has a responsibility to make sure that we do all things possible to help this university. And this university is going to thrive because it's already shown its history. But we need to also take claim on the irresponsibility of not funding the university at the rate that it has requested over, and this is not just in my 20 years, it was prior to it. I gave a little history lesson at our conference when the presidents would all come to the governor's office to make their presentation, and our president was always the last one to come in, and then they didn't even refer to him in his name. And that president, Dr. Atwood, not only did he request and they gave money, but he was very focused on making sure that the funding was made and paid, and he even sometimes returned to the state money that he did not use. So, and the university was underfunded then. So I want to make sure that history, if we're going to talk about the history in 10 years or 6 years, we talk about the history of the university when it came into existence and how it came into existence and how funding has not been provided in the way that the other universities have received. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to have my comments.
You're very welcome, Representative Graham. Our next meeting will be on November the 2nd, 2-week turnaround, and be chaired by Co-Chair West. Meeting is adjourned.